Are you looking to expand your aesthetic practice and attract high-quality new patients? Discover the power of digital marketing in growing your practice with a personalized strategy session. Schedule your meeting today by visiting www.businessofesthetics.org/MSM and take the first step towards transforming your practice with the potential of digital marketing.
You're invited to join our exclusive monthly webinar brought to you by the Business of Aesthetics community. Don't let this chance slip through your fingers. Secure your spot now for a game-changing experience. Register for free on our homepage at www.businessofesthetics.org and get set to transform your strategies.
You are listening to another episode of the Business of Aesthetic podcast series, brought to you by our gold sponsors, Equa Marketing. If you would like to network and share your experience with our podcast guests and other aesthetic industry professionals, join our Facebook or LinkedIn communities by searching for Business of Aesthetics. Prepare to be inspired as we introduce an esteemed professional in the field of plastic surgery. Meet Dr. Lauren Umstadt, a board-certified plastic surgeon of exceptional repute, practicing in the vibrant locale of Leawood, Kansas. Her expertise and dedication have earned her high acclaim in the industry, and today, we have the privilege of delving into her insights and experiences right here on the podcast. Without further ado, let's dive in.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I am so excited today to talk to Dr. Sinehan Bayrak. She is one of the Bayrak babes, which I want to talk about.
Okay.
We have known each other for a few years, although we rarely meet face to face. It's always these like little sassy texts we send to one another about our field and running a business and being a woman in surgery. So why don't you take a few minutes and kind of tell folks kind of who you are as a person, a little bit about you personally, and then let's get into your career so far as a facial plastic surgeon.
All right. Perfect. Well, I'm so excited, Lauren. I'm a little scared. I'm like nervous. My name is Jack. I am a facial plastic surgeon. I currently practice in a very nice suburb called Westchester, which is just right outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Kansas. I did my fellowship down in Florida, and I love what I do. So I am newly married to my husband, Khan, who is my biggest supporter, maybe second biggest supporter. I think my mom's my first, just by default. But I am just so happy. I've been listening to this podcast for years. So the fact that I'm like on it right now is kind of a weird moment.
So you had a little bit of a unique start out of fellowship. I want you to talk about it in as much detail as you're comfortable. You know, you joined somebody. It wasn't perfect. So you
Mhm.
decided to do your own thing. Walk us through as granularly as you can how that all worked, because a lot of people listening are interested in either joining somebody or joining a big group because it's daunting thinking about starting your own practice.
It totally is. And actually, what is maybe was the first daunting thought I had was, so I'm in my fellowship, and I feel like maybe it was just me, but there was this moment where I was like, oh my God, I'm not done after this. I have to find a job. And for me, I knew that I didn't want to be in the hospital. I had trained at a big academic institution. Part of my fellowship was being junior faculty at a big institution. And while it has its advantages, it just wasn't really what I was interested in. I really gravitated towards the more cosmetic procedures. And I think more so than that, maybe you can relate to this. I just like to be in control. I like to optimize and facilitate what I want the patient process to be. And it's hard to do that in a big system. You can't, arguably, you can't do that. So I knew I wanted to be in private practice. I knew I wanted to focus on cosmetics. And at the time, I was single. And so while it may be kind of a maybe not so important thought to some, I was like, okay, I need to be able to support myself. So taking out a huge loan or a line of credit or honestly, like winning the lottery wasn't necessarily in the cards for me. And I, by nature, am a very risk averse person. And so I just through the grapevine heard that someone was thinking of bringing on a facial plastic surgeon. And my first and I'd say only employer after fellowship was a general body plastic surgeon. And it's one of those things where on paper, it sounds like it's just going to be amazing, right? Like there's no overlap. But I think, like most jobs, you don't really know how you're going to feel about it or what it's going to be like or what the fit is going to be until you're actually in it. And what's unfortunate is by the time you're in it, it's a little too late to change your mind. So ultimately, I do think that it got me to where I am today. So in some regard, I am very thankful and appreciative for that experience. But at the time, it was really difficult in the moment because we're all in, right? Type A, we're perfectionists. That's what makes us good at what we do. But in the moment, I felt like a failure. I was like, I can't even make my first job work. And we all know on an objective level that the first job after training typically never works out. Most people are only at it for a couple years. But I think there's always the sense that you're going to be the exception and you're never the exception. So I was the facial plastic surgeon at a established general plastic surgery practice. I was lucky enough to get pretty busy very quickly. And ultimately, when it didn't work out, I leave. But by that time, I had met somebody. At the time, he was my boyfriend, but now he's my husband, and it just made sense to stay, and so I did. And I think the rest is history, pretty much.
Yeah, I to pause for a bit and talk about, I love that you use the word failure. There was this movement years ago on social media called Failing Forward, and it was all of these people that are now quote unquote successful that talked about things in their past that they felt like were failures. You know, whether you had to take your MCAT twice, or whether you didn't match into residency the first time, or your first job didn't work out. But the whole notion around the movement within social media was that, yes, I quote unquote failed, but I'm still moving forward. And we really have to have some hiccups or speed bumps. I hate to call them failures because they do bring us to where we are today.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. That's exactly what it was. And it was a tough pill to swallow. I'm not. And I remember being like, I don't lose, right? We didn't get to this point by losing or by being second best or not being able to make things work. But I do, as cliche as it sounds, and I always hate saying this, but I do think to some extent everything happens for a reason. And I think it was meant to happen and it was meant to bring me to the moment that I am now. But when it was happening, it was not a good feeling, and it was very challenging to work through. So I'm grateful, but it was definitely a moment of growth.
Yeah. So, okay, you've decided one day that probably after lots of days that the current position that you were in was not working. How long did it take you to have what you have today, your own practice? How long did that process take of you transitioning out of the plastic surgeon's office, finding a place to go, getting it up and running, and having your first patient walk in the door?
Hmm. Well, this is where I think an important piece of context was. Uh, Unfortunately, I think for both parties, it became very clear months before it ended that this was probably not going to last forever. And again, I'm an independent woman. I wanted to make sure that I was able to take care of myself. So to answer your question succinctly, it was about 5 weeks from my last day there, to my first day seeing patients for myself. Now, during those 5 weeks, I hustled. Really, I mean, actually, that's a lie. I took 1 week to just totally decompress and just try to figure out what I wanted to do and how I was going to do it. But I think an important point that I have to make is the being able to have the foresight when something isn't working. And I actually LLC'd and created a business entity for myself months before I left. And I just needed it as a backup, because without that, it doesn't matter how many degrees you have or how good of a doctor you are. And for anyone that's worked in like a government position or a government adjacent position, these processes take a lot of time. And so I will admit that I did support myself, because that was a key to see patients within 5 weeks. Usually, I think in Pennsylvania, it takes about 2 months sometimes to get that paperwork squared away. So really the only tasks I had were to find a space, to open accounts, and to figure out what sort of platform I wanted for billing and payment and so much more than you think. And I think if you just take the time to figure out how to do things, usually it's not as hard as you think. And so I guess my biggest piece of advice to people who ask me about private practice, because it is so daunting, because we're not taught these skills in residency or in medical school, and usually not really even in fellowship, is it's totally doable. And there are so many resources out there that tell you exactly how to do it and exactly what your options are. So it was 5 weeks. It was a week of meditation and then about 4 weeks of hustle. So
That's incredible that you made it work in that short of a time period. So, how long ago was that? And then tell us how your practice has grown since then.
So it was, I left my previous position. I believe I also have a good memory, for better or for worse. It was August 19th, 2022 was my last day. And my first day of seeing patients for Bayrak plastic surgery was October 3rd, 2022. So I guess officially it's been a little over 2 years, which is literally crazy to think about. I feel like it was yesterday. And obviously there were advantages to having worked someplace else. Because while I wasn't like the person in town, I still am the youngest, newest person in this area that typically is very isolated, in the sense that people that are from here stay here and I am a transplant. But I at least had some sort of a following or name recognition. And so, obviously the beginning was slow, but the only thing I thought of was I just need to be able to pay my expenses for this month. And to be able to do that, I need to see 4 patients or 6 patients in a month. And I was like, okay, I think I can do that. That's not that bad. And luckily I was able to um, to go beyond that. So it's been very organic. I think I didn't really do any paid marketing my first year. I still don't really. I mean, technically, I guess I like am sponsoring like the local high school football team something. Like I have a banner there, but I don't really do like paid marketing because the organic growth has been so successful, at least for me in the 2 years that I've been in practice. So slow and steady wins the race. But definitely at the beginning, I was like, okay, I just need to get like 5 patients this month. So I was just focused on covering those expenses.
Then I get the sense that you are solo cosmetic, or only cosmetic. What percentage of your business, I guess you could do it time or revenue wise, how are your weeks split between surgery, non-surgical treatments?
Yeah. So at the beginning, it was definitely more heavy on the non-surgical. And there were a couple reasons for that. I think number one is because I had literally only been around for a year. I was also the youngest person and youngest appearing person. The other complicating factor was that, like most physicians, I had a non-compete. And unfortunately, the non-compete affected my ability to use the surgery center I was at. And
Mm.
for anyone that's ever done credentialing for a surgery center, it takes months to get it approved. Even if like I'm super good at being the squeaky wheel, but even so, it just takes so long. So for those first few months, I was really relying on the non-surgical to pay the bills, so to speak. And then, after that, it slowly started getting busier on the surgical front. Now, my week to week varies. Obviously, if I'm like going out of town, I try to adjust my surgery schedule the weeks prior to. But for the most part, um, I do like local anesthesia procedures on Thursdays. A lot of my bigger cases are on Tuesdays, Wednesdays. I was actually just talking to the head anesthesiologist at the place I go to now, and might start picking up some Fridays. So I would say in terms of revenue at this point, it's probably about 50-50. I think it's getting to a point where I am thinking about maybe bringing someone on that can help me address the demand for the non-surgical treatments.
Mhm, mhm.
So that's kind of exciting, but I would say about 50-50. And at the end of the day, I'm a surgeon. I love to operate. Do I want to be operating 100%? Honestly, probably not. I truly enjoy I don't want to say simplicity of injectables, but it is lower stakes. It is less stress, and it gives me an opportunity to interact with a patient that's not under anesthesia and get to know them a little bit better. And a lot of times I'm treating my surgical patients. So I think in general, it just allows me to provide like a very holistic treatment. So I enjoy it for multiple reasons. I can't say I'll ever get rid of it like 100%. It may be something that I just offer to surgical patients or established patients, but I think at this point it's probably about 50-50. And if I had to pick my sweet spot, it would probably be like 75-25.
Mhm.
75 surgical, obviously.
Yeah. Um, Tell us a little bit more about hiring, firing your team. I think that is a struggle with a lot of different offices. Who do you work with now, and who do you get to work with at your office? Who do you get to work with at the surgery center? You are arguably have less control over who you get to
Hmm.
work with there. How does that dynamic work? Think about
Yeah.
you listening to this podcast with someone in their residency, and kind of what advice would you give them?
Yeah. So I'm not sure if you know this, but to the first part of your question, it's going to be a pretty short answer. So I did something a little crazy where when I started my practice, I was geographically restricted. I honestly just kind of needed a break from everybody. I didn't hire anybody. And instead, I curated a really tech heavy practice. So a lot of my practice is automated. Um, I exclusively offer self scheduling to patients. The platform I use has an AI assistant that can address a lot of questions that come in. All that to say, I don't have any employees, nobody. So, in terms of hiring and firing, I guess the answer to that question is easy. I don't hire and I don't fire. Now, obviously, at this point, I'm no longer restricted the way I was, and I'm looking to scale and grow. I think by nature, I'm someone that's always looking for bigger and better. And so that is probably going to change in the next year or so, but I will probably be coming to you for advice when it comes to that. At the surgery center, I'm very lucky. I usually get like the same people. And so at this point, we've kind of cultivated an understanding of like how I like things, how what we need for my cases. The anesthesia staff is great. The nurses are phenomenal. I tried out a few places when I moved here, and I'm sure you know, like every place just has a different vibe. And I was lucky to find some place where I really like them, and I really am grateful for the care that they give my patients, because obviously they are a reflection on me. So all in all, I mean, otherwise I work with myself and I think I'm great. So that's basically that's basically it. It gets lonely sometimes, but that's why I like our group chat, where I can bounce ideas off of other people and get opinions on things that I'm trying to decide on. So
Yeah, that's incredible. It speaks to, it's 2024. It speaks to the power of technology, really, and how you've been able to harness different platforms to help do the things that humans could do or used to do, or,
yeah.
Um, when you said that, I actually thought about kind of the emotional perspective of maybe being lonely.
Hmm.
You went from residency to fellowship, which was smaller, and then now, how do you deal or kind of um, approach the loneliness factor that a lot of solo surgeons, physicians, providers feel on a lot of days?
Yeah. I mean, I think number one is our group chat. I love it. I think even if it's just to commiserate, sometimes that is just so helpful. I actually am friends with my old practice manager where I used to work, like real life friends. Like at the time, obviously, it was a more professional dynamic, and she is invaluable. I bounce ideas off of her all the time, and she's in the industry. She understands kind of the clientele and what people want, what people don't want. I joke and say my husband is like, I wear like a million different hats. He also wears a million different hats. So he's an attorney by profession. So that's helpful occasionally. But he's also like handyman. He's my PR department. And yeah, he's just overall like my number one hype man. So um, other than that, it just you find other people to discuss things with and bounce ideas off of, and try to get some sort of outside third party opinions, so that you aren't just stuck and siloed in your own little mindset. So, and then of course, just when it comes to education, conferences are great, and I just try to keep in touch with as many other surgeons as I can.
Hmm. Yeah, samesies. Also, it's very helpful to have a supportive spouse. Mine also was here this morning helping me with something, even though he had a million things to do for his own career. So,
Yeah.
um, not necessarily loneliness, but stress management is something that I think changes as we get more mature, as we progress in our
Hmm.
career. I had kind of a freak out moment at work today. I won't get into it, but my team saw me just totally lose my marbles for about 2 hours over
Yeah.
something. Talk to us about kind of the work life balance, so to speak. What are some of the stress management skills that you've developed over the years?
Mhm.
What do you do to get away from work? How good are you at not thinking about work?
Well, I'm terrible at not thinking about work, much like I'm sure you are. It's just part of the personality, I think. Like what makes you successful is also your biggest flaw. And I think number one is I, I don't want to say it's like learned futility, but I have come to accept that I am not going to make everyone happy. That is impossible. When especially like as my patient base has continued to grow, it is just you're not going to knock it out of the park every single time because no one knocks it out of the park every single time. And honestly, that's not even the expectation for most professions. So I feel like that's where I try to be mindful that not every patient is going to love me. Not every patient is going to come back. I used to take it really personally. And now it's just like, listen, actually you told me this very recently. It's business. Like it's a business decision. It's not personal. And at the end of the day, like the schedule gets filled. And so I try to just remind myself that as much of a perfectionist as I am, and as much as I have those qualities, I can't, you can't be that hard on yourself. Now, I also try to, and this is a relatively new thing, but in the evenings, I really try to unplug, so to speak, because the problem with a tech heavy practice is that technology never stops. So every time someone schedules an appointment, I get a notification. Every time someone reschedules an appointment, I get a notification. Every time someone engages with the AI messenger, I get a notification. And it's kind of tempting. Like I want to look, I want to see what's going on. But if you do that, it never stops. As opposed to a traditional office where the phones are off at 5 p.m., right? So I've gotten a little bit better about, nothing is an emergency, or very rarely is it an emergency, and this can wait until tomorrow. This is not worth cutting into dinner. This is not worth cutting into like our TV time in the evenings. Because at the end of the day, right now it's just me and my husband. We do, I think, plan on starting a family at some point. And, in the future, you have to be present. Like I can't be glued to my phone the way I was my first year of practice. So I'm still working on it, but I do think I've been doing a little bit better. So we'll see.
We are in an industry that is ripe for improvement, evolution, new technologies, new techniques. What are some of the things now that you're super excited about? And what are some of the things potentially on the horizon that you're excited about for your patients?
hmm I think for me, what I've been the most excited about and what I want to, I mean, I would say one of my biggest strengths and weaknesses really is like this constant need for improvement. And I think pretty much anyone would agree when you look at the surgical results that people are getting now, I would argue that they're the best that has that have ever been made or produced or put out there. And so we're pushing surgery, I want to say to its limits, but without compromising natural results and refreshed results. And so I am very committed to just constantly improving that aspect of my practice. I know you and I talk about this all the time, but I just think that we're doing things that have never been done before, or at least not as well as they're being done now. And we're able to achieve just crazy, amazing results because of that. Now, the unfortunate part of that is that's the expectation now because that's what's all over Instagram. But I do think that the surgical advances that have been made in the last 10 years are just they blow my mind. And every day it's like, here's something new I can try to get my patients those results. So it's kind of a rat race, but it's a rat race that I sadistically love. So,
Oh, same girl. I obsess over things I can do differently. I obsess over other people's results, these mentors that we look up to. I just went to a surgical course and talked to some of the phenomenal surgeons that were teaching there. And one of them mentioned like almost a downside to him becoming so great is that now all of his patients expect those phenomenal results that he posts online. And so he said that even today, when he gets an average result or a mediocre result that he still thinks is very good, the patient is unhappy because they're not the top 1% that, go
yeah.
viral on the internet. What strategies do you have for dealing with these unhappy patients?
Uh, I lose sleep over unhappy patients. And luckily, I don't have like very many at all, but every now and then, I think what I hope they understand is that it is just as disappointing for me as it is for you. I mean, obviously, maybe not to the exact same degree, but I don't ever go into a surgery or a procedure with the goal of anything less than 110% improvement. But things are complicated. The body is complicated. Healing is unpredictable. And we're not always going to get the Instagram result. And I've had patients point to results on my Instagram and say, well, why does hers look like that? And it's like, well, she's a different person. Her anatomy is different. And even if you do the same exact thing, the same suture, the same steps, the same maneuvers, it doesn't mean that you're going to get the same result. And that's really frustrating. And I mean, no one's going to do this, but I think one solution to this is maybe we all post our less than ideal results, but that's a loaded can of worms there. So I think I just try to, if I see what they see, and if I am also underwhelmed and disappointed, then I am more than happy to make any tweaks. I don't charge a surgical fee in those instances, because my goal is to get you the result that we both want. Now, if I am in a situation, which I haven't been in yet, where I think it's an objectively great result and the patient disagrees, then that may be a little more complicated. And I do think that probably happens more often as you grow in notoriety and popularity. And it's not something that I'm necessarily looking forward to. But I will say, I was doing something last night. I was critiquing one of my results, and this is where it pays to have a non-surgeon, non-medical spouse. So I'm looking at these photos and I'm just like, oh, I hate that bulge. Like, why is that bulge there? And I'm showing my husband, and he's like, what are you talking about? Like, what are you even pointing at? And I'm like, don't you see it? It's right there. And so I think having a quote unquote like lay person around you to kind of bring you back to earth and be like, no one else is noticing what you're noticing, can be very helpful in these situations. So, I don't know if that happens between you and your husband, but it's nice. It's nice to have that sort of perspective.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I think patients sometimes forget, or maybe just don't know that we as surgeons are also underwhelmed with their results or disappointed in their outcome. And so I think when you tell them that, like, hey, I'm also underwhelmed, we're on the same team. If you can give me a little bit more downtime, then let's make some tweaks. And I had my first patient last week who I think her result is phenomenal, but she is unhappy. And so I'm kind of working that out, but she's my first one, like you mentioned, that she is very
Yeah.
unhappy. And I personally think her result is great. So that's been eating me up for the past couple weeks. But, again, we're on the same team here. I want you to
Hmm.
be happy. Safety number one, of course. We can't do anything unsafe. But at the end of the day, I want you to be happy. So if there are things that I can physically do to gain improvement, then let's talk about our options. And then let's talk about what's not an option or what's not safe to do at this point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. I do hope that patients realize, like, I think about you probably just as much as you think about you, and when it comes to your surgical results. And I mean, I'm sure we've all been there. You leave the OR, I'm just going through the steps in my mind. And I am invested. And maybe that's something that is unique to maybe the younger surgeon, when you really, really, really care about your results and every patient that you see. But I do hope that my patients know that, like, I am 100% invested in your outcome. And unfortunately, some things are out of our control. But if there are things that we can do to make you happy and to make it better, then I mean, obviously, I'm willing to do that. But I think, in terms of the scenario that you were in, it's only a matter of time before it happens to everybody. And I think that's where, before and after photos are so important. I am militant about taking photos to the point where, like, some of my patients come in and they just get on the photo stool without me even saying anything. Because I think one thing that happens is, you get used to the way you look, and
Mhm.
sometimes we forget where we started. So I make it a habit to take photos often and to put them together often and to send them unprompted often. It's kind of like losing weight. I think if you're working to lose weight, you see yourself every day, you don't really feel like anything's happening, but someone that hasn't seen you in a couple months sees you and they're like, oh, wow, like, have you lost weight? So I do think there's an element of just like getting used to your results and then kind of forgetting where we started that can be harmful when you forget that.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a great analogy. Um, let's talk a little bit about marketing. Let's talk about your amazing Google reviews and how you've encouraged so many people to leave great reviews. And then also, let's talk about some of the different platforms that you found helpful in terms of marketing your practice.
So Google reviews were, to be honest with you, very difficult at the beginning. I'm sure there's a term for this, like, social psychology phenomenon, but I feel like if you only have like 10 Google reviews, someone is like less inclined to leave one. But once you get to a certain number, people seem to be, they seem to do it more readily. So my approach has always been through my scheduling platform, as soon as a visit ends, to text the patient a message that says, hey, mind doing me a favor? Leave a Google review. And that part was very uncomfortable at the beginning because I don't like asking people for things. But if you don't ask, you're never going to get it. So I just kind of made it a process, or I'm sorry, I made it a fixed component of the process of coming in, having an appointment, leaving. And it's painful at the beginning, and I still get excited when I get a Google review. Like, um, so I think the key is just to ask for it constantly and consistently. And I think it was Catherine Maley's podcast where she said something to the extent of people have to be asked like 5 or 7 times to do something before they do it. And so there were moments where I was like, oh my God, I'm being so annoying. I'm just like pestering these people for Google reviews. When in reality, like, how many text messages do you get where it's like, okay, I'll look at that later or I'll do that later? And sometimes it just takes a couple times to get people to fill one out. So I do find that that has helped my practice a lot, because I know when I am interested in going someplace, I look at the Google reviews. And that is like a very organic way to, like, boost your SEO or whatever. So that has been great for my practice. Instagram is probably the social media platform where I'm the most active. I wish I could get to your level on TikTok, but I just can't. You're like You're so good at it. But I focus on Instagram and I try to be consistent. That being said, there are some weeks where I want nothing to do with it. It's just, it really is another job. I think people don't maybe realize how much time it takes up, and it may look easy, but behind that, you know, one post is probably like an hour and a half of putting the pictures together and making it look interesting and coming up with a caption and doing that even just 3 times a week takes up a fair bit of time. So I do what I can. If I don't feel like doing it at this point, I don't beat myself up over it. There are some weeks where I'm in a super social media mood where I'm posting and I'm filming. And there's other weeks where I just like hate my hair and I don't want to do anything. So that has been great though. I think it is invaluable. It allows for patients to get to know you before they even come into your office. And I think that is the biggest advantage, because if someone's making an appointment, to some extent they already either like me or something I've said has resonated with them. And so we're not starting at zero. Like we're not even really just meeting. I'm meeting them, but they've already started their relationship with me. So I find that it's been honestly one of the best things that I've done, as annoying as it is some weeks.
Oh, for sure. I have to consider it as part of my job. It is not fun for me to get on, but I look at as a critical part of maintaining a successful business. But it is exhausting. I agree with you. And there are weeks that I am great and then I'm in the mood, and there are weeks that I kind of drop the ball. And but like you said earlier in the show, it's a marathon to some extent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
But at this point, I ask
keep going.
sorry. I was going to say, at this point, I ask every patient, how'd you hear about me? And it's either word of mouth or Instagram. So,
Yeah, that's incredible. And I would assume that as you become more well known in your community, kind of that tight knit community of Westchester, the word of mouth will only continue to grow.
mhm.
What
Yeah.
what big goals do you have, professionally and for your practice over the next 5 years?
Oh, that's a great question. So, I think the biggest goal is going to be, so last summer, my now husband and I bought a building, actually. It was a very non-traditional purchase in the sense that it's actually an old Pennsylvania schoolhouse. So it was built in 1850. It was used as a school for about 100 years. And then it was sold to a private citizen. And the people that we bought it from operated a very successful photography business out of the building for about 40 years. So it was interesting. When I first started seeing patients at my permanent office, I would have some people come in, they'd be like, I think this guy did my wedding photos. And I'd be like, yeah, probably. So we purchased that last summer. It's been not this past summer, but the summer before. And it's just been kind of a year of just TLC, kind of getting things to where I want them to be. We built out about half of it just to have ready for me to see patients here. So we are actually gearing up to build out the rest of it so that I can have more space, more exam rooms. Um, so in terms of the space, that's the plan there. Now, in terms of personnel, I do think things are getting to a point where my one woman show is not going to cut it for much longer. And so I think in the next year, I'll probably look at bringing someone on that can help with the administrative stuff, and then potentially a dermatologist that can help me with some of the non-surgical, but also kind of increase the size of the pie, so to speak, by being an expert on skin and offering services that I don't offer. And also I'm not a dermatologist. I think that they probably are more suited to certain skin concerns. So those were kind of my two big things. And then I guess like the overarching goal is I love what I do. I enjoy coming to work every day, even on the hard days, and it's worth it. And I just want to continue to feel like every day is worth it. So that's basically it.
Oh my gosh, heart emoji like over your head, as you said. I just want every day to feel like it's worth it. Yeah, I think we work in an industry that is so high reward, but it's also so stressful. Jesus, there are days when I'm like, why do I do this? Why did I pick
Yeah,
facial plastic surgery of everything? Because that one patient will eat at you.
absolutely. And I do think, I mean, this is a hot take. I think women, I think we just are more, I don't know if empathetic is the word, but I think it affects me more when someone is unhappy than it would many of the male colleagues that I have. And I don't know that for sure. But it's just a feeling that I have. And I think that's a good thing because I do think that for, in an industry where most of my patients at least are female, there is that sense of commonality, and the connection is very different than I think the connection with a male surgeon. But at the same time, it can be your downfall. And sometimes I have to remind myself, like, this stuff happens. You just have to water off a duck's back. You just have to keep going. So it is hard. It's very hard. My mom actually recently was like, why didn't you go into like radiology or something? Because some days are very difficult. And I think the most important thing is as long as the good days are outweighing the difficult days, we keep doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, give us some bullet points here. What are some good books, good podcasts, good
Mm.
resources that you have consumed and made you a better business person?
So, in terms of podcasts, I love this one. I love Ed Williams's White Coat Entrepreneur. I've been listening to that for years at this point. And then I really enjoy Catherine Maley's podcast. The name is, I'm blanking on the name right now. But those are probably my top three podcasts. I learned a lot of what I implemented in my practice from Facebook groups, which every time I say that, I feel like someone's like 80-year-old grandmother, because it's really kind of the only thing I use Facebook for at this point. But the Business of Aesthetics Facebook group, invaluable. There's another called Medical Aesthetics Owners Forum that's also very good. And then of course there's a big group called Physician Community, where when it comes to like who are you using for your processing, who are you using for your scheduling, what are your rates, it's helpful to know what other people are doing so that you can take those experiences and learn from their experiences and not have to just start over from zero. So I would say, I mean, honestly, between those podcasts and the Facebook groups, it's basically everything.
Yeah. Well, if someone wants to get a hold of you, tell us how they can find you.
So Instagram is probably where I'm the most active. My handle is at Dr. Bayrak, B as in boy, Ayrak. So at Dr. Bayrak on Instagram. I think it's the same on TikTok, but I'm not sure. But otherwise, my email is just dr@bayrakmd.com, and anyone's welcome to email me. And that's probably the two best ways. I always joke and say, so I don't take any phone calls in my practice. I just don't find it to be an efficient use of time. And so really the only way to not get a hold of me is to call me. So
And then if anyone wants one of your Bayrak Babe sweatshirts, are you still retailing those or are those coming soon?
I've been so the Bayrak Babe sweatshirt was something that happened. I had a friend, her name is Rachel. She's very crafty and she was in between jobs And it was her idea, honestly. She was like, you should have merch. And I was like, who's going to wear my merch? And so I guess I asked around, did like a little like a survey to sample of patients, and people seemed to like be interested. So she made a couple. They were made to order. That's the problem. So they were a huge hit. And for me, I was like flattered that anyone would even wear it. But also I was like, huh, that's pretty good marketing. Unfortunately, Rachel then found another job. And so the sweatshirt business came to a halt. But there seems to be this like demand for it. So I don't know. Maybe I'll proposition her again, but or just hire it out. But the Bayrak Babe sweatshirts are currently on hold. But if and when they do come back, they'll just, I think, be available on the website. So
Well, thank you, Dr. Bayrak, for talking us today, and congratulations on the first 2 years of many to come.
yes, thank you. This was awesome. You're always such a pleasure to talk to. And I've already told you this, but I didn't, I liked this podcast before, but I like it even more now that you're on it.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Business of Aesthetic podcast series, brought to you by our gold sponsor, Equa Marketing. Would you like to join our growing group of aesthetic industry experts and get featured on the Business of Aesthetics podcast? Or do you know someone who would love to share their strategies for growth in the aesthetic business, providing quality patient care or their clinical expertise? Head over to www.businessofesthetics.org podcast show and apply to be featured as a guest on the show. Remember to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Amazon Music, or wherever you listen. If you would like to engage with today's speakers or any of our past speakers, join our Facebook group or LinkedIn group by searching for Business of Aesthetics. Thank you, and have a great day.